everyone. This is Marila from Marcus Evans. Thank you all for joining today's webinar, Driving Customer Engagement with Omnichannel Approach from Conception to Launch, brought to you in partnership with Merge. Before we begin, I would like to cover a few housekeeping items. As you can see at the bottom of the screen are multiple application widgets that you can use. All the widgets are resizable and movable, so please feel free to move them around. If you have any questions during the webinar, please submit them to the Q&A widget. Try to answer as many as possible. However, if we run out of time, we'll make sure to answer to you via email. If you have a question during the webinar, you can click on the help widget. It will help you navigate better. Also, on the resource widget, you can find many links and PDF files with white papers that you can bookmark or download. At this point, I will also want to mention that we have a disclaimer. So every opinion of each panelist depends on their personal perspective and rather than the business. I would also like to introduce our moderator for today, Pat McCoy, Chief Client Officer at Merge. Pat, you can take the stand.
All right. Thank you so much, Marilia. And really excited to share today's conversation with one of my favorite people, Brooke Fleming, and we're going to talk about one of our favorite topics, which is omnichannel engagement. So thanks for joining us, Brooke. Do you want to take a quick sec to introduce yourself?
Well, what a coincidence, because you're one of my favorite people. So I'm so glad that it's a mutually shared feeling. Brooke Fleming, I don't want to say too much about, me. I could go on for days, but I'm at Sage Therapeutics. I'm the head of orchestrated customer engagement there. I consider myself a digital native. I've been doing this work for a very long time before it was cool. And I'm excited to talk to you today. I'm excited, Pat. Like we talk to each other often, but I think this will give other people an opportunity to kind of eavesdrop on our conversations a little.
Exactly. So let's just let's get started to warm ourselves up here. We'll go with a basic one. What does omnichannel mean to you?
So I make that face because every day, I feel like I've added something new to how I look at the work. But for me, it's really just the connectivity and the orchestration of both our data and our content with the intentional design of those things with the purpose of creating experiences for customers that are meaningful to them, that really sort of hold up what they consider valuable. I have a really I think different view about how omnichannel should be done, because I think that it's really supposed to deliver what it is that we intend to deliver to folks, but based on their value proposition and not our own. And I think that really takes some paradigm shifting in the ways that we work and how we think and how we make plans. And so, it's really for me that intentional design, the intentional connectivity and the harmony between our data, between our content, and between our strategic plans in order to get things out channel wise. But every day I feel like I can expand or contract what I think about omnichannel from a definitions perspective. But what won't ever change is the intentionality behind the design of the plans.
Yeah. I hear you.
What about you?
Yeah, I mean, you said so many great things there. So it's kind of hard to build on. But I would
He's starting early with the kindness, and so we'll see that wear down. We'll see that wear down as time goes on in this chat.
So just to build on your thought there, I think it all comes from a place of people want to be seen, right? And you want to feel seen, and your customers want to feel seen. And I think when you do omnichannel the right way, you're showing me you know me. And there's a lot of mechanisms and a lot of operationalizing that have to be done and orchestrated behind the scenes in order to give that target audience the impression that you are seeing them and you're seeing their needs and meeting those needs. But really, and that all comes down to the data, right? How we're
That's right.
capturing the data and how we're leveraging that data to really create more meaningful experiences.
You tell yourself really quickly, right? Like you can tell that you're not listening to your customers just based on how you show up. You can tell that that's not a preference.
Exactly.
They definitely didn't want that email or that text message. They didn't want it. They didn't engage. They didn't engage with it. Like you can tell. That's what I mean by like switching from our value proposition and what we want to turn on and where we want to show up, and really like paying attention to where customers telling you that they are, where their preferences are. So I am not the person to tell you that omnichannel is turning on everything, because you could turn on all the channels and still be as irrelevant as ever.
Yeah.
So
that's such a great point.
That data matters.
And then, what role would you say omnichannel plays in an overall sort of business and marketing strategy?
So firstly, I think that it's important that the customer engagement strategy is a subset of it should be a subset of your brand strategy, right? And so how that comes to life and how you do your experience planning and you plot out, again, going back to the idea of intentional design, is crucial, because especially with it's 2024, we've got several things. We're always multitasking. Everybody's got several things going on at the same time. You need to maximize attention once you grab it. So I think planning it out is a crucial part. It's not an option. Like I think everyone wants to jump right to the technology. They want to jump right to the platforms, or even sometimes that off-the-shelf solution that may promise to deliver omni-channel experiences. But if you didn't do the work to sort of plan out based on what your brand strategy is, like how do I want to intentionally create a continuum of experience for someone based on where they are, that I can tell from the data, because I need to know behaviorally and attitudinally about this audience, based on what I know, and this is where they are, but this is where I want them to be. Well, what did you plan out and how did you intend for them to get there, so that we can be mindful of spend and resources and sort of all those just fundamental, things that we have to think about daily in our work. But it's a crucial part of just you don't get to see, I don't think, as much success in the business if you don't intentionally design experiences for folks that you say you're doing the work for. So I think it's a crucial, like stepping through the experience planning process, and that engagement planning process is key critical. Like you can't skip it, because if you do, you can tell. Like
exactly.
Things reveal themselves pretty easily. Yeah.
For real. And I think it just is. It's part of the marketing strategy in 2024 and beyond. It's not something that you should be considering. It's something that you should be doing, and you don't have to boil the ocean with it, but you should be picking your spots, right? Pick your places.
I think gone are the days where you turn on all the lights in the house, right? Stop doing that. Yeah. Just turn on the lights where someone's sitting in a room. You don't need to illuminate the entire house. Go to those specific places, turn that light on, be in that room, be present in that space. And I think you'll see your audience respond appropriately, but it's table stakes at this point. You can't really get away from it.
Yeah, for real. I totally agree. And I think, when we're thinking about an omni-channel approach, we're thinking about it in terms of a system, right? Instead of thinking about it in terms of maybe historically a multi-channel approach or a siloed approach. And, within inside organizations, there are always those silos. And I think the key to being able to navigate a true omni-channel engagement is really figuring out how best to break down some of those silos so that you can align on the delivery model that your target audience needs, right? I think we're set up functionally inside an organization to do things repeatedly very well, whether that's sales, distribution, marketing, customer service, what have you. But sometimes those functional silos create a choppy experience for our 100%. Target audience.
100%. And I think changing how we think about how omnichannel fits in brand strategy will also eventually make its way into how we think about operationalizing it, because you can't do it. One function isn't going to get it done, right? Like we hear people talk about next best action all the time, or modular content or dynamic assembly, and in doing that, that takes multiple functions, right? So the end customer is the customer, but someone may be creating the content, and that might be different than that's obviously different than your review committee body. That's obviously different than the platforms through which the content's cycling through, and those people who might be the stewards of those platforms, and the creative agencies. There's so many parts to this, and I think we have to be a little bit more open to change, and to the evolution of our processes as we talk about expanding the way we go out to our customers, right? Like gone are the days of just like creating that one email in a silo, getting it approved. It takes like 4.5, 5 weeks, maybe longer. You push it out, one down. And like, what is happening? We're talking about being relevant and timely, and there's things that we are going to have to change just fundamentally from an operations perspective in order to have that volume of content available to us, and also that sort of rapidity, and like the fluidity that needs to, and agility that needs to exist in the process, so that we can start to see like the responses that we want to see. Because you send me an email, I assure you, if it was sent 4 weeks ago, I do not recall. And so why is it our expectation that our customers remember that last touch that we put together and deployed 4.5, 5 weeks ago? It's just not, it's not feasible, and it's not a sustainable way to be relevant. So we got to change some things up, I think.
Along those lines, what are some of the biggest challenges you or your team have faced in building that omnichannel, that seamless omnichannel experience?
Yeah, I think the first one is patience, right? Not a lot of it exists. So this process, and I think just from a maturation scale perspective, just takes time. And I think we have to offer ourselves some grace to get things wrong, and offer ourselves some grace to make mistakes, but then also be able to articulate how we are learning and pivoting from those mistakes and those learnings to others within the organization. Because I think there might be, especially if you've been doing something, that playbook from before is tried and true, because that's just the way that the industry worked for so long. But as things change and evolve, iteration is the key to success. And so you might take some time to get there, but you need to be able to articulate with those cross-functional partners and those stakeholders who might be involved in the process somehow, how you may be doing things differently next time, or why there was a bump in the road this time. So I think it's just an ongoing effort to upskill and to be patient, not just with ourselves and our teams, but also just with the process. And being open to shifting and changing something if it doesn't work. Because it worked for a bigger organization, but maybe not for the size where you are. And maybe it works for the size of that team, but not necessarily for the size of this one. It just all depends on the circumstance and the situation. But I would say like the biggest lesson is just being able to be nimble, identify when something just didn't work, and change it when it doesn't. Like, don't just see it be wrong and just persist. Change can be hard, especially when something is new. So I'd say that's the biggest.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, because I think there is so much information that is created from this approach, and sometimes that can be overwhelming. And it's really important to align ahead of time on some of the key metrics that you're going to be looking to hold yourself accountable to deliver on. Yeah. And then recognize, as you said, when you're not achieving those metrics, where is their drop off? Like, where are we falling short? And do we have a hypothesis that we can test around why we're falling short there, so that we can course correct and use that feedback that's coming from the system to get better over time? And that's why I like this slide here, because it really is almost like an infinity loop where you're constantly learning and growing and learning and growing. Yeah. And I think if you start on the left-hand side here, you're seeing the storytelling, right? And it always starts with that. If you look in the 8 o'clock position, the journey mapping and insights, you're starting with that understanding of your customer journey to the best of your ability, of like, where are they getting hung up? What are the moments that matter in that journey? And then what is the creative content and the sequential messaging approach that's going to be relevant to them in that journey, right? And what's the content and what's the context for that content, so that you can be as relevant as possible.
I like that this slide doesn't just jump to the platform that's enabling omnichannel. You often hear like, oh, I partnered with such and such and we've got an omnichannel solution. That's incredible. But I think the work, again, I'll say, I say it all the time, the hands on the keyboards, that pen to paper, that storytelling, that content strategy development, like building out a true understanding of your audience and like really getting those messages aligned appropriately based on whatever needs-based barrier that you're trying to remove is the work you need to do before any platform is like, comes into the conversation. And I'm a big advocate of taking the time to do the work to set it up so that the platforms are successful, because the plan that it's running was thoughtfully considered. This is a really good slide. This is a really good slide. I think to your point about measuring and setting up KPIs, it's incredibly important that we do that early. Learning agendas, measurement plans, setting those things up early. And I think they're living, breathing documents, obviously, but you should not just be like measuring your tactics. Of course you should, but also just like those successful indicators for the work that you're doing. Like, how long did something take? What was the volume I was able to, to produce? How many people were, like, look at it from a people, a process, and a platform perspective, and really put some, I would say, tangible key performance indicators for all of those sectors against those. And maybe it's just 3 or 4 things in each of those areas, but it's critically important, so that in retrospect, you can go back with that same group who worked so hard to get something done and say, look, we did a great job, but here's where we had some opportunities and some bumps in the road. Like let's fix that. KPIs shouldn't be scary, and they don't mean you failed if you didn't achieve. It's not like a pass or fail kind of situation. And I think, again, to the mindset, we got to change how we look at it, because if you don't learn from anything, did you do it right? Did you do it right? So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said there around the learning agenda, right? Like, it's the whole process is an iterative feedback loop where you're learning, you're capturing those learnings, and you're just trying to be better the next turn of the cycle.
Yeah. Right?
And one of the things I've noticed too sometimes is that when people think about omnichannel, they think about it maybe just on the front end. I think of it in 2 pieces, front end and back end. And then maybe they're thinking about the front end as like, oh, I'm doing targeted media, so that's omnichannel, and maybe not really appreciating the back end part of omnichannel and that MarTech stack component. Have you seen, similar observations in terms of folks maybe contemplating that?
Yeah, because I think that especially recently when Omni became kind of like that buzzword, I think people definitely thought that there was an easy button solution to turn it on. Like, I got paid media turned on, I'm running banners, I'm running third-party emails, I'm running on closed social media for HCPs, I've got all these, and that is Omni. And that is nice that you to think that. I think, but it's and it's partly true in that you have a potentially robust mix of channels, but the harmony that I mentioned before when you asked me about my definition and the orchestration part has to exist in order for it to be omnichannel. It's still multi-channel if you turn on all of these things and it's not connected through the data, and it's not necessarily connected through the back end technology, right? So if you got a CDP, you've got maybe Viva, maybe you got Salesforce Marketing Cloud, but nothing's integrated even manually, like no one's passing anything. Your maybe your data warehouse is over here, but it's not connected to anything. We all, like from an HCP perspective, you might have the customer profiles connected to Viva, but they're not being updated every time there's a non-personal engagement happening when you have physician level data, right? So the intention to be for us to get closer to the customer is to understand what the customer is doing. And you cannot do that if there's a disconnect between what they're doing, where the data is sitting, and what you do next for that customer, right? And so even if you're not automating or if you've not integrated the tech, there's still a way to make sure you're even manually, it's a pain, but manually passing information and connecting those things from a platform perspective. And so having the appreciation for the fact that that media partner and that media agency that you're working with, yep, they delivered the data to you and you put it on SharePoint. Well, that's not helpful to that's not very helpful to the process because it's not being placed in the place it should be in order for us to continue to learn from it, right? So you can't optimize what you can't see. So you may be getting a host of data, but if it's just sitting in the reports that are coming over, or it's just sitting in an Excel sheet or a CSV and you put it on your company's SharePoint site, it's good that you have it, but you really have to start putting, I think, some plans together to work on that back end setup, work on that data warehouse, work on the connectivity between your customer data platform, your CRM, and any other tools that hold and store customer information and customer data, because you need that golden record for that person to understand what it is that you need to be providing them next in a timely way. It can't take 6 months to figure out that you probably should have got an email, 4.5 months ago. Like it's not,
all relevance is lost at that point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got a question we just got a question from the audience. What guidance would you give someone orchestrating the move from adequate multi-channel to omni-channel in a small organization that knows they want it because it's cool, but don't necessarily buy in or know where to begin?
Ooh. So if you're already doing multi-channel, you're probably really well versed in like those customer facing places, but likely you haven't really set up that back end like what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
That's you got to set that data warehouse, that integration with Viva, if that's what you're using from your reps, if they're calling on customers, whatever like marketing platform you're using to deploy emails or send text messages. You need those, I call them like brilliant basics. You need those brilliant basic like platform technologies set up. And maybe you need to assess build, buy, borrow, right? Because if you're a small company and you don't necessarily want to internalize all those capabilities, partner with a company who have those platforms and will do that work for you on your behalf. And maybe that's where your budget goes. But we're in a really sensitive time right now with privacy and consent. So internally, you're gonna have to start to get to the place where you're able to store first party data, really moving from that third party paradigm to a zero party or first party data paradigm. So you're gonna have to store that data internally anyway. And so if you do just really weigh the risk benefits of partnering with someone for the rest of it, or internalizing all of that tech yourself, that back end piece is critical, and it's bigger than just that MarTech component, right? Like it's bigger than just that marketing technology component. It's the data storage, it's your cybersecurity, it's really how you go about connecting all of those pieces. And even if you're only doing 4 things right, do those 4 things right and just like be okay with it until you're ready to, move along your, that maturity scale for you. But I would start with just getting those brilliant basics in place from a platform's perspective and decide if it's worth you spending the money and doing it internally. And do you have the resources and the teams? Or, you know what? I think we should borrow this capability from somebody else or buy it from someone else and allow them to really support us on the back end.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant piece of advice. I think one of the other things, and we kind of touched on it earlier, about like, don't try to boil the ocean. I think especially when you're first starting this process and this journey, your journey toward being more, omni-channel in your approach, we like to focus on, what are those MVP scenarios? Like, what's that
Yeah.
minimum viable product that we can put out there that will allow us to test and learn before we try to scale and do all the things? Like, what are the ways that we can test and learn and tweak and understand, okay, this flow works. These things that I thought were going to work aren't actually going to work, or we need more support or resourcing over here to be able to make this execute the way we had envisioned. And I think that's a really important point, because invariably when you're going down this path, there are always going to be skeptics within the organization. Usually those skeptics are have heavy influence in the purse strings of how we're spending. So we need to make sure.
Isn't that funny how that works?
Exactly. It's like a one-to-one tie. But I think it's good to be able to get those quick wins, right? And if you try to do too much at once, you won't have those quick wins to be able to show and share with the skeptics, to show that this does work and this is the way forward. So that was the other thing, mastery of the basics, as you said, and just, focusing on those quick win opportunities to start to build that momentum within your organization.
And like, celebrate those wins. Like, they might be small, but they might have mighty returns later. Like, celebrate them. I think oftentimes too, what I've seen is there's a commitment to omni-channel from a platform's perspective, but going back to making the connection on those silos we talked about before, there's not a commitment on the content development. We could have all the platforms and all of the data warehouses set up, and we've got Marketing Cloud, and we've got, I don't know, Viva, and we've got Health Cloud, but there is no content in any repository. The funnel is running dry. Well, that won't work. That won't work. And so I think we have to really be appreciative about all of the needs and the list of to-dos, because again, it just doesn't sit with one function, unless maybe you are a super small organization or a super small agency and you literally have your hands on all the keyboards and you're doing everything. But I think there just has to be a full-throated, a wholehearted commitment to the creative development, the content development, and I think the ongoing strategy behind how your customers need to be spoken to. And even, I'm going to say this because I think oftentimes people like to divide personal promotion, which is our sales force, and non-personal promotion. Those things are very much connected. And in some cases, from a strategy perspective, maybe your non-personal is an amplification of your sales force. Maybe it's an extension, whatever your strategy happens to be. But those things should not be disconnected, and they should speak to each other from some type of feedback loop perspective that you've put together. Whether in non-personal assets, you've put like those quick survey questions or those texts to reply, something that allows your customer to speak back to you. Or from a sales perspective, you've got your reps able to answer questions in Viva. But all of that's insight and intel into how one thing feeds another. So we got to stop treating them differently. It's not, these aren't separate efforts. They are separate executions. They're not separate. They shouldn't be completely separate strategies. And I think oftentimes that's what we are so hard internally working to avoid. Like, you got people over here just doing digital, and people over there just all the sales, and not one person has talked to the other. I'm like, wait, one is, we're also, supporting this business, this brand. And so how do we do that effectively together? And that's under the umbrella of your omnichannel strategy.
Totally. And I often say that, like, the technology is actually the easy part. It's the
easy part.
The human consensus building is the harder part, right? And how do we get these different, functional silos working together
Like
toward
that.
this end, right?
Yeah.
And I put my former client hat on and I think about this, and it's like, if you think about your field sales organization, it's probably the biggest marketing investment we make
Yeah.
as pharma marketers, right? And
Yeah.
to make sure that we're powering that partner with all of
Yeah.
the best information to help them be as productive as possible, and also being realistic with, like, the reality is the amount of time they're going to be in front of that customer is
Mm-hmm.
very brief, and it's
It's brief.
often has a lot of space between it. Like, I might get
Yes.
15 minutes with a doc and I might not see her again for another 4 weeks, and then I get
That's
another
right.
15 minutes with her. So how can we stay relevant and top of mind with her in those 2 15-minute
That's
sessions
right.
that my field sales rep had,
I
right?
love that. It's true. That continuity of message and continuity of experience, right? Because you left
Mhm.
my office. Like, I saw you for 15 minutes, like you said, but the likelihood that I'm going to independently go do some reading or some research or some fact finding in my downtime or in between patients is that the likelihood is high. And so there shouldn't be a complete um, chasm between experiences, like the one that I just had in person and the one that I'm often able to just go have on my own, right? So we connect those things surely by the data, but we also connect those things by the message platform that we've created. And because we know our customers as well as we do, we are able to have them to leave them with something that allows them to take that as a cookie crumb to go on and find the rest of it on their own. And so they're not completely disparate experiences, in person versus,
Totally.
independent. So
And I think, like, when that's where I really think there's so much potential in where we're going with next best action, right? Because
yeah.
I'm a rep. I had a conversation with that doctor. She was really interested in the mechanism of action of
Mm-hmm.
our therapy. Like, okay, let's, between the next 4 weeks, between when I'm in front of her again, let me serve up an email or content that goes into a little more detail. Maybe it shares the mechanism of action video,
That's
so
right.
that you're kind of continuing that conversation and not starting a new one in that time lag between when you're having that face-to-face interaction.
And because you've put that feedback loop in place, you're allowing her to drive what she needs to see next and giving yourself the opportunity to appropriately respond to that. And I think, like, we from a next best action perspective, I think people they're like, yep, I turn on that banner and then they got this email. But was that the best action? Did you take that person's preference into consideration? Just because someone's not available from a sales rep perspective does not mean that they want that email, right? So going back to understanding our customers, it doesn't automatically make them a digital customer. It doesn't. We have to go back to the data, right? Being intentional, purpose driven, data driven, experience planners. We have to take into account the journeys and the lookalike experiences that we're going to put together for those who we don't have access to, both non-personally and personally. Like, what's the experience going to be? Is that person truly out of my reach? Do I try anyway, even if I know that that's not what they want? Again, moving from what I want and my value prop to theirs. And oftentimes you can figure out what people want by just asking them. There's syndicated research that you can purchase, and likely you've got a lot of internal data already that you just need to kind of sort through and organize effectively so that you can see how people previously engaged with you, unless you're a net new, product or brand. So I don't know. I think my holy grail is going to be to move from next best action to next best experience. I think I got a couple years before I get there, but that's my personal goal. I do want to, I am evangelizing, like getting out of the mindset of just like connecting the channels and saying that that's NBA. If the channel connectivity and what you served up next from a message and channel perspective weren't indeed informed by what the data told us that they actually wanted. So I think taking the time to invest in those analytic models that help us understand where our customer ceilings are, like how many
Mm-hmm.
emails are too many before people opt out, how many, like, is there a level of promotional sensitivity that I need to be aware of, and am I taking those sensitivities into account? Like, all of those things just have a, and again, I think it's science and a little bit of art.
Mm-hmm.
But just playing with the recipe and figuring out what's in the best, what's best for your customer, what's best for your product, what's best for your brand, and doing that, and being unapologetic about it until you have to apologize. So you just got to try. That's where that test and learn comes into play, right? You have to put some, you have to be a little bit brave, I
Mm-hmm.
think.
Sure. So we got a follow-up question on the sales side of things. Can you talk to the change management to ensure sales adopts this new way of working?
Yeah. So is that for me or you? Is that you? Me?
I just came in from the audience. Do you want to take a first crack, or you want me to take a crack at it, or?
I'll try to go first, and then let's see if I don't
Okay.
screw this up. So I think change is scary, and change management from an investment perspective is one of those things you have to consider, especially if it's like a net new um, process or operation that you're putting in place. And our sales teams are super important and key critical to the business. And so their uptake and understanding of things are super important. Be careful not to over communicate the things that I think simplicity is key. Not everyone needs to know every single part of the sausage making process, even if they are on some part of the they're part of the process in some way. They may not be a part of the process the whole way. And it can be very overwhelming, especially if you've got professionals who've been doing it a specific way for so long. So I think having an appreciation for likely change fatigue, because if you're instituting this, there's probably a host of other things that are also changing. But also what they're remembering what their primary jobs are, and that the goal is to help them understand how this enhances that and adds value to what it is that they're delivering on a day-to-day basis is where I would start, right? Like you don't always have to get people to align or adopt. Sometimes you just got to get them to hear first. Like start just with the receptivity, and then I think that the repetitive message about how it supports, and then showing this is how this supports you, this is how it'll enhance what you do, and this is definitely how it benefits our end customer, I think is where I would start. There are so many companies though too, from a change management perspective, who are really, really good about coming in and helping galvanize folks and get them on the same page, if that's not something that you can do yourself too. So I would say start with a simple message, one that's tangible, something that they can understand, and then allow them to see where they come in and where they come out of the process, but that it's much bigger. So I just wouldn't over communicate and tell everything, because it can be to your detriment and it might die on the vine, and that's not what we want.
Yeah. And I the other piece of advice I would give there is, making sure you're tuning in to radio station WIFM, right? What's in it for me?
That's right.
So, like,
I like this. Oh, you're so corny. That's amazing. What?
So, like, that's what the rep, at the end of the day, that's what they want to know, right? Like, what's in it for me? Well, how are you benefiting me in my performance and my objectives for my territory or regional manager or sales manager? How are you ensuring that this isn't going to be a distraction for my team?
Exactly.
And how are you going to ensure that this is a 1 + 1 = 3 type of thing, where maybe you're identifying those ways that you can help deploy the reps' time more efficiently. A lot of these reps have a lot of windshield time, and if you can identify through an omni-channel approach those docs who are most interested in seeing that rep, then they don't have to go around manually hunting and pecking, trying to find who's going to be interested in the story. If someone's saying, I'm interested and I want to see someone. So the more we can demonstrate the tangible value to how it's going to help them achieve their goals and be more effective at their job, I think that's an important point in that that beginning part of the process, if you really want to start to integrate what we're doing from an omni-channel perspective with the field sales organization,
That's
is
right.
making sure we're helping them be more effective at what they do.
I agree. That's that timeline, that pre-call planning, time that they spend getting ready to go see a customer. I really believe a rep will care about what a healthcare professional did on a website or what email they opened with some intention when it's on their timelines, and they can use that as intel as they're getting ready to go see that person, because it helps them be smarter, not creepy, because but it helps them be smarter about the interaction they're about to go and have. And so I think you should really showing how you've got all of these tools in place, and so much of it helps them do their jobs easier.
What is your proudest omni-channel victory?
Ooh. Incorporating connected TV. And it wasn't consumer, it was healthcare provider. And it's and I'm going to say it's hard because, number one, it's not consumer. Number two, the story you have to curate internally in order for it to be understood in a medical, legal, and regulatory environment. Makes you use both sides of your brain. Yeah. So I think it would be that. I think the ability to connect like that type of medium with the things that are tried and true, the stuff that we do very well, very easily, you know. It would be that. And this is going to sound weird, but also I'm thinking of the same campaign and the same brand, but the ability to thoughtfully incorporate print. Because print as a channel isn't dead. Again, going back to customer preferences and their affinities and how they're going to best consume that information, it very much has a place. You just got to know your customer. And so I think the incorporation of print and the incorporation of connected TV on the HCP side of things, and being able to sort of migrate a bit away from those calendar-based approaches and really go to an AI based approach, because you know that machine learning had been happening all along, and it finally got smart enough to help us out a bit. So those business rules that prompted those experiences are now relying on our artificial intelligence and our machine learning a bit more than we were at the start. So I would say that, yeah, I slept well. That was yeah.
That's great.
Long vacation after. Long vacation.
Little along those lines, what trends are you most excited about when it comes to omni-channel, and where do you see the biggest opportunity?
I have to just always caveat, I am a behavioralist. Like, I believe in behavioral data. So I'm going to go back to that preference thing every single time. But selfishly, like if I didn't have to pay attention to what customers said they want, where they were consuming, I would audio. Yeah, podcasts, like old school broadcast. It's back with a vengeance, and it's a missed opportunity if you don't think so. Like if you like the data on how people are consuming information in their cars, it's really impressive. And if I can have someone's attention while they're in traffic, even if it's passively, depending on the message, I'll take that. So I think audio. And I haven't quite figured this out, but I'm working on it, because I think accessibility is big thing. Like I think people in, you know, all professions need to be able to experience, have experiences that were intentionally designed for them, even if they are, um, even if they don't consume in the same way that someone else does, whether that's
Mhm.
visually, whether that's
Mm.
how they hear. And
Mm.
so I think there's an opportunity for us to be a little bit more aware
Mm.
of some of those like challenges that our customers have because they're people,
Mhm.
and expand our reach to them in ways that's accessible to them, that doesn't make it like right now. I think a lot of channels make them work to get the information because it's not designed for them. And so I think that there's something there,
Mm.
where we're just being a little bit more thoughtful in how we create experiences for everybody. So
Mm.
still working on that one, but I think that there's some testing to be done there.
Mm.
Um,
That's a great
it's an
one.
opportunity. Yeah,
That's a really great one. I think the empathy piece, right? Just
for
again,
sure.
trying to have an understanding of what that person's situation is and what they need, and kind
Yeah.
of
They
meet them.
chose they chose their jobs as their professions, but they still show up as people every day. And so that brings along things. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're trying to reach them, you gotta you have to, I think, overcome the thing that they overcome every day.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess another question along that line is how does data and those insights shape your approach? How are you
Ooh.
leveraging data to maybe create that more empathetic engagement?
Yeah, so many different types of data. Firstly, like I think that because there's so much big data, definitely being um, intentional enough to make it smart. Like you don't, just because you have it don't mean you use it
Mm-hmm.
immediately. So being thoughtful about which data is driving your decision making, and then getting people on the same page about what you are using to do the work you're doing, because there's always more information pouring in, but I think we've got to be able to filter out the noise in the moment where we've set a plan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Take the information, put it on the shelf, because the plan used this data. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it's just about being curious and having data still always coming in. So of course, market research is important. Of course, purchasing syndicated data is important. Of course, like listening to that first party data that's coming in, critically important. But I think it takes discipline and some restraint
Mm-hmm.
uh, to figure out when to use it
Mm-hmm.
and what to use. So
Mm-hmm.
some things are always on and you need to constantly just be learning and knowing, and it's feeding. And then some things are like, that's a nugget. Like that's something I want to make sure I do justice to. Don't let me just throw it in an email as a message at the bottom of that ECRM email number 3. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that sounds intentional? Not really. That's not the
Yeah.
best approach to using the information. So I think it's just not thinking that you can turn it on once you get these platforms set up and leave it, but making it your business to pay attention to what's happening and continue to curate the experiences as you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's where having a measurement plan
Yeah,
developed ahead of
early,
time, kind of being,
before.
yeah, like you said before, like being intentional, like beginning
Yeah,
with the end in mind, right? So,
yeah.
like, these are the outcomes that we're shooting for.
Mm-hmm.
What are the data that we need to capture that are going to show us we're making progress toward these
Yeah,
outcomes that
yeah. And
ultimately
what did
will
we
lead?
learn that we didn't expect to learn? But don't let that
Mhm.
throw you off.
Yeah,
Like, take that information. But
right.
but these other things that you set up early on in that measurement plan and that learning, like things you set out to understand, like what are those data saying? I think we get very distracted because sometimes a lot of stuff comes in that we just didn't even account for, and then all of a sudden you've turned all of your attention to that, but you've abandoned what you set out to do, because you're not even looking at how that's netting out. It's not. It's supposed to be it should be your North Star, I think.
And with that, what advice would you give to organizations that are just starting on this omni-channel journey?
Stay hydrated. It's gonna get really hot.
That's awesome.
I mean, I think that you have to have strong teams of people. Like get your teams together, but like of varying, diverse backgrounds. Like I think a lot of people think you have got to be some type of marketing technologist or some type of digital guru. No, you just got to be open to doing something different, learning something new, and committed to improving customer experiences and understanding like what that means fiscally, what that might mean from a time investment perspective, and make it your business to make it your business. Like you have to build it, because especially if you're doing everything from scratch, experience planning might be new to you. Content management might be new to you. The platforms and the data literacy might be completely new to you, but it is not impossible. And then when you have diverse teams, people who come from diverse backgrounds, it makes it that much easier, because maybe someone's really good at helping you set up that measurement plan. Maybe someone's really good at translating like how that strategy makes its way in the MarTech. Maybe someone's really good at understanding like how the content and the marketing arm and the platforms that you need to set up from a customer experience perspective meld and come together. And I think it's really important to be a little bit more open to people's diverse backgrounds, so that the teams that you form support the ambition you have.
I love that. Yeah, I like to say it's like bring together unlike-minded individuals, right? So bringing those different perspectives. They're looking at the same problem, but they're coming at it from a completely different lens. Yeah.
Yes.
And you're able to
I don't need a bunch of me's. We don't need, please. Please, it's exhausting. No, just someone else say something. What else? Because I am going to always be the person in the room like, I don't know what that meant. Can we take a step back, ask the questions, be inquisitive, be curious, and be able to like hold that curiosity within the confines of the team you manage, or that you're building or are a part of. Like cultivate a culture of learning, so that you're sharpening one another, because it gets rough, and that's really not going to matter at what level of experience you have. It just can get rough. You know what I mean? And it can get expensive, and you just have to be like, what does our MVP look like? Let's just stick to that. Like, let's stick to that. And then we've built a 3-year roadmap, and over time we're going to grow into this, but we're going to be patient with ourselves, because we are at step 2. So let's start at step 2. This is where we are.
Exactly. Well, that's such great stuff. Well, I think we've answered all of the questions. I think it was amazing to hear your perspective, Brooke, on Omnichannel.
I had a good time.
Me too. I had a blast.
We should do this more.
Amen.
Thank you for having me, Pat.
Thanks for joining me and answering all my questions.
Anytime. Just call me. Anytime.
I will also want to thank the audience for joining in, submitting so many questions, and for being so interactive with our panelists. I also want to mention that a survey will pop up on your screen. Just spend a minute or two. It's just for Marcus Evans to have your feedback about any future webinar. What did you love of today's webinar, except the speakers, of course, and how amazing chemistry they had. On behalf of Merge and Marcus Evans, thank you all for joining today's webinar, and we do hope you'll be joining next time. Thank you so much for your time, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. And thank you.